Hey everyone, what's up? And welcome back to Culture Binge, the Wisecrack podcast where we get into everything going down in the zeitgeist right now. I'm Michael, and I'm here with Wisecrack writer Alec and Wisecrack researcher Serby. How are you guys doing today?
Hi. Well, how are you?
I'm, doing as good as anyone can be doing right now. Alec, how are you doing and feeling?
A little stir crazy, but I'm fine.
Okay, stir crazy, but fine. In light of the stir craziness and the weird times, I'm curious to hear what everyone has for chaps and slaps to get us started. Life is constrained. It's a little different than normal, so I'm curious to see if that has affected what is slapping and chapping in our collective lives. So, Serby, would you get it started? Get right into it. What's slapping?
Yes.
What's chapping in your life?
So, Instacart slaps. I have been ordering all of my groceries online, and it's been great. Yesterday, I got an order, and it all came, so that was very exciting. Also, I have been tipping quite a bit, so I hope
We were about to ask. I think we were
that
about
brings
to
you
all
a
ask.
lot of joy.
Yeah.
And that's the new threshold. If you stand between me and death, you get money. So, very pleased.
I mean,
Now
I'm
this-
happy that you're tipping them well, but I hate that it has to be at risking their own life, too.
Yeah, that's a great place to be in as a society right now, where we get to weigh our tips on the basis of how much one's putting their life at risk and how much our own life is at risk. So that sounds good. But do you use Instacart normally, or is this like a special indulgence during this time?
Just right now, during this time.
Nice.
I like going to the
Nice.
grocery store. It's very calming in a lot of ways.
I also
I've heard-
like the grocery store.
This is insane. I've had multiple people tell me that. I don't understand it at all, and I don't relate to the idea that going to the grocery store is calming, but I respect that it's calming for both of you.
Maybe
Yep.
it's because everything is so organized and like it's clean looking, and I don't know, it just feels really relaxing. Like everything is orderly and neat.
Well, there you go. So if Instacart slapping, what is champing in the life of Serby this week?
So I really want a puzzle, and all the puzzles are sold out. I've looked on so many websites, and all the jigsaw puzzles are sold out, or the ones that are left are super expensive.
All the
Or they're
puzzles?
just- All the puzzles are gone. Everybody's doing puzzles.
Serbia, I can send you some.
Really? You
to
have
pay for
puzzles?
shipping. Yeah, I got like a weird puzzle exchange going on with friends, and I actually think some of them are mailing some to me. But I'll get to that in a second, because this is a very weird coincidence.
Wow. So the
Wow.
reason why I want to do a puzzle is that a friend of mine is doing a puzzle call with her friends. So they work on their own puzzles for 30 minutes every day, and they just chat and hang out. And I thought that was so fun to have a
That's
puzzle
amazing.
call. Yeah.
That's
I don't want
exciting.
to jump the gun, but my slaps for this week, and
Do
I
it,
wrote this
do
down,
it.
I'm not making this up, is actually puzzles. I'm doing a 3,000-piece Star Trek puzzle, the original series, and it's amazing. And thank God for puzzles, and I'm sorry that you're sold out.
Wow. That's so exciting. I will say, too, if anyone who's listening or watching has a puzzle connect, maybe get in touch with us, and you can send Serby some black market puzzles.
Yeah.
That's great. Wait, Alec, had you been an active puzzler before this, or is this a self-isolation activity?
Me and puzzles go way back. My grandfather was into them when I was a kid, and we do them. But there was like a long period of my life where I didn't puzzle, but my partner really likes them. So, we've done them occasionally. I've gotten her puzzles as gifts, whatever. But now it's puzzle season because we're stuck inside all day.
Wow, I love that. It's puzzle season. Okay.
I know. So good.
So what is chapping for Serby is slapping for Alec, but now what's chapping for Alec? Is it Instacart?
Is it Instacart?
No, it's just people who breed tigers. We're gonna talk about that.
Okay, so it's all connected. Let's
Yeah.
people who breed tigers. Great. I'll do mine real quick then. My chaps. I guess this kind of relates to Serby's in a way, but what's chapping for me is the realization that right now, at least where I live, food delivery is becoming not a real option anymore. And by that I mean A lot of restaurants are closing down for the safety of their employees, so I respect that. And actually today, in the New York Times, there was an article where a food writer was talking about the kind of weird moral gray area with food delivery right now. And then in California, in Los Angeles, where I'm at, this week they basically told us to stay inside and not get food or do anything if we can help it. So that's a bummer because it has been this one little reminder that a real world exists outside this apartment, is getting food from other places. What slaps, however, is I started in the past week, I got back into using the Libby app to download audiobooks from the public library.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been doing book walks because I've gotten bored of taking aimless walks around the neighborhood on the same paths and blocks. So started listening to audiobooks this week. It's been fun. The only bummer now is with the whole stay inside if you can thing, I'm now paranoid to even go on my audiobook walks. So I guess it's really a chap and a kind of slap chap. But that's what I got.
I haven't been doing walks, but I did go one time in the past month, and I went to an empty parking lot, just like a really big parking lot, and just walked back and forth because
that's cool. And that looks normal too. If I see someone walking in a parking lot alone, I assume this is someone who has it together and who's doing well.
Yeah, and I had like big sunglasses and a black mask, and I had my hoodie on, so obviously I looked very safe.
Oh, wow. That wouldn't raise suspicions at all for me. And I hope more of our listeners decide to do that. And then you're not taking walks at all, Serby, in general? Are you just staying inside?
Stay inside.
You're an inside kid?
Yep. I'm trying to do my part.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. And this is good. I predicted our slaps and chaps would be constrained by the constraints and limitations on our lives, and they were. So we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to get into COVID-19 conspiracies. We're going to talk about the Peace Corps and ask, are the Peace Corps really that peaceful? But to get started and to touch on what is chapping in Alex's life, we're going to talk about Tiger King. I think it's just hard to say that we are a podcast that deals with what's going on in the zeitgeist and not talk about Tiger King right now. I think it's been the most talked about cultural artifact over the past few weeks. And for some reason, it seems like it's become the perfect self-isolation quarantine entertainment. Now, let me ask you all before I get into it. Serby and Alec, have we seen Tiger King, and how much have we seen?
I watched it. I hated every second of it. It was
What?
very hard for me to watch.
Okay, well, we'll get into this, but you've seen the whole thing. Alec, have you seen the whole thing?
I've seen the whole thing. As of yesterday or the day before, I've lost all sense of time.
Okay, so for anyone who's watching or listening to this who hasn't seen it, and I'm going to imagine if there's one thing most people have seen, it's this. It is the story of a failed independent candidate for president from Oklahoma named Joe Exotic. And along with his presidential run, he runs a we won't say makeshift, but he runs his own zoo that features lots of tigers and cats, including other animals. He gets into a beef with a woman named Carol Baskin, who maybe or definitely killed her husband, and who's based out of Tampa, who runs a cat sanctuary. We have side characters like Bhagwan, who is a weird cult leader who grooms women to work at his tiger rescue in South Carolina and charges people $300 to pet them. We get a guy named Jeff Lowe, who's this sleazy criminal that's a very bad guy and wears do-rags and hats every day, even though he's like a 55-year-old bald man. A lot of other stuff happens along the way, but the main gist of the story is there are two people, Joe and Carol, that both run tiger zoos or sanctuaries, that both think of the other as the enemy. And one of the gist of the story, and I guess I can spoil it, right? Or should I not? Can it be spoiled?
Earmuffs if anyone doesn't want it spoiled.
Earmuffs it, but I honestly think this doesn't change anything because there's so many twists that it would be impossible for us to really spoil it. But one of the main narrative arcs of the documentary series is that this guy, Joe Exotic, puts a hit out on his enemy in the tiger trade, Carol Baskin, because her organization is sort of attacking his, giving him bad press, trying to turn PETA and other animal organizations against him. Because of this, Joe Exotic ends up in jail. And I'll just say right now, Joe Exotic currently has COVID-19.
He does?
In jail.
Oh, does
yes. He? Yeah. So this really touches on everything. Now, the wildest thing about this is I think I started watching this the second week it was out, after I just saw so many people on social media talking about the Tiger King over and over and over. And, me and my partner started watching it. We're a little bit appalled but got very caught up in it. And it was very entertaining. I think the week we watched it was maybe like a week and a half into largely being self-isolated. Now, I really liked it when I first watched it. Now with a week or two removed, I feel bad that I liked it. And it kind of brings up this question of, why is it so entertaining? And why do we like stuff like this? Because there are no good guys or no good people in Tiger King. Every character, to a certain extent, is bad. We have various forms of abuse to both humans and animals. We have attempts at murder and maybe successful murders. We have one person who's running a sex cult, which seems to be grooming women to be a sort of harem. We have people who seem to have clear emotional and mental disorders who are not being taken care of and are being abused. We have the main character, Joe Exotic, the Tiger King, who both grooms young men with meth and then convinces them to get married to him in a polyamorous throuple. I think that's what one calls it. I know things. And there's no real clear resolution to the story other than one person ends up in jail. But by the end, it's pretty dark. Yet, it was very compelling. And one thing I was thinking of this in comparison to was Making a Murderer, another Netflix series that I feel like came out. Everyone started watching it. But Making a Murderer, while it touches on some dark things and maybe some messed up people, was asking some fundamental questions about the nature of the criminal justice system. And I think the underlying theme in Making a Murderer is that there are, whether or not we think this guy did it or not, that there's serious issues in criminal justice in this country we all need to think about. I don't think Tiger King really gets at issues of animal abuse and laws around that in any meaningful way. I think that's all kind of in the background. The story largely has to do with these insane people and the insane things they get into. And it's a weird sort of entertainment in that it's hard to watch this without at various points sympathizing with people in it. And I even remember like 2 episodes in thinking that Bhagwan was kind of cool. And then right when I was like, I said out loud to my partner, I was like, oh, this guy kind of rips. And then like 2 seconds later, it was like, oh yeah, and he's like a piece of shit that runs a sex cult and, shoots tigers and buries them in his backyard, and he rides an elephant around the neighborhood. At any point in this, you think you might sympathize for someone, it turns and you immediately feel really bad. So let me ask you each 2 questions. What was your experience in watching Tiger King, both as you were watching it and as you've had time to process it? And what do you think this says about us, that as a culture we've largely been obsessed with this show for the past 3 weeks?
So when I watched it, I really liked the first 2 episodes, and then it kind of gets more true crimey about, this hit for hire. Where did Carol Baskin's husband go? And that's when I started kind of disliking. I wouldn't even say dislike. I was just like, whatever. But to your point, I think like this story could have easily played out. And the guy who makes the documentary who's in it is like a turtle conservationist. And I think the craziness of Joe Exotic and Doc Antle and all these people could have actually like put in some like good framing of actual kind of debates and questions about conservation, right? Because I think what ends up happening is like it frames first of all you hear about the criticisms are from people who hate each other, right? So when Joe Exotic is criticizing the way that Carol Baskin raises tigers, like Joe Exotic will say anything to sort of get back at her, and he'll say that Doc Antle runs gas chambers for the big cats and whatever, and vice versa. Carol Baskin also hates these people, and there's never a moment where they like actually talk to a person who's maybe a little detached and says like, oh, here's sort of like the debate or interesting question. Because this comes up a lot in just nonprofit zoos or conservation in general, in that there's a lot of very good criticism of zoos, keeping animals in cages. It's bad for them, whatever. On the other end, it's hard to deny that someone coming like seeing a tiger will make them care more about it, which is a sort of message that Joe Exotic has. Now the problem is he's not very believable because he's just making what I imagine is millions of dollars off of people petting tiger cubs and all that shit. And so like I don't know the answer to these questions. I'm very skeptical of zoos in general, but it would have been nice to hear like a smart framing of like actual conservation people who are detached from the bickering of these weird people. And so I was disappointed in that sense. And sorry, what was your second question?
Oh, the second question, and this is maybe the one where I'm asking you all to sort of speculate sociologically. Why are we all so obsessed with this? Why do we like this so much, and why do we like things like this so much?
Oh, well, I think Joe Exotic is a very good kind of tragic hero, at least like in the Greek sense, in that it does a very good job, the documentary, of setting him up. And even in the final scenes that they do this, he's kind of this person who truly, really does care about tigers, at least at first, and then has this fatal flaw, which is his narcissism or his sort of greed. And then his life unravels as a result of it. This is exactly what happens with every sort of kind of tragic Greek figure, you know, in lots of stories and stuff like that. And so it's hard when at the end they show Joe Exotic criticizing people who breed tigers, and how he's kind of strayed so far from that, but now he's getting his comeuppance in prison and he's so distraught. It's hard not to, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be in prison, but it's hard not to sort of want him to learn his lesson or get some redemption. And also I think just in general, the world is so very complicated and crazy, and it helps to have a very easy villain, whether it's Billy McFarland and Firefest or Joe Exotic and Tigers, you know?
Yeah. Serby, same questions at you. What did you think, and what does it say about us?
Well, I really appreciate everything that Alec just said, and I agree with a lot of it. I had a very difficult time watching this series, and it was playing in the background, and I remember when I finished the first episode, I was so stressed out and upset, and I couldn't figure out like why I was so tense the rest of the day, and it was because of this documentary. I hated the animal abuse and cruelty, and I can't sympathize with him at all. I think he's just the worst person. I think everybody in that show is terrible, and the fact that Netflix didn't ask important questions, it was almost as if like, here's like a train wreck of a show, enjoy, and there was no substance beyond that. I think I found that like just very disheartening, because there was no like good or bad. There was no moment where I thought like, well, is it good that he's breeding tigers because we don't have that many in the wild? Or is there a way we can learn from him? There was nothing like that. It was just, he's a meth addict and he abuses animals. And as for why it's so popular, I think that people have a strong need to belong, and they'll jump on any bandwagon they can. And if this is the new trend for people to be supporting Joe Exotic and saying, I read somewhere that some celebrity was going to create a GoFundMe page to get him free. Yeah, and like,
I think the Kardashians were going to do something. I heard something that like Kim and Kanye wanted to use their criminal justice prowess to free him.
So, yeah, like things like that. Like I don't know if they think it's funny or if they truly believe it, but I think that people just really want to feel a sense of belonging. And if this is the new thing that everybody's talking about, they want to feel relevant and a part of the conversation. But I think that can have significant negative effects on our perceptions of what's right and wrong. Like, everybody's talking about how he's such a great character, or he's funny, or what a wild story. But what about the fact that he underfeeds these tigers, and that he kills them, and that he takes them away from their moms at like 3 days old or an hour old? He took them away and was letting people pet them. So nobody's focusing on like the animal abuse. And that I find very upsetting, especially from Netflix. I feel like it could have been a more interesting series had they focused on something more than this trash human.
Well, do you all think that if we were not, or if most people in the Western world weren't currently some level of isolated or quarantined, that this would have become such a phenomenon?
It's hard to say. I think it would have still been popular. I also think another part of the popularity, and you know, I agree with a lot of what Serby's saying, is just the fact that big cats are awesome and they're fun to look at. And like half of me watching this documentary is like, I really want to pet that tiger. I would not actually go and pay for it. That is bad and wrong, but I really want to.
Yeah. Well, maybe one of the positives here is if people watch that and, like Alex said, their takeaway was big cats are pretty impressive. I mean, maybe go watch Planet Earth instead, or one of the delightful nature documentaries, or anything made by David Attenborough, where you can just see tigers in the wild not being abused. I mean, one very minor moral question that comes up in this, because at one point, and I forget the actual number, but they bring up that there's more tigers in captivity right now than there are in the wild. Yep. And I think, maybe there's some logic here I'm missing, but it's hard to not think for a second, well, like, in a very utilitarian way almost, I guess it's better that there's this many tigers than no tigers.
No, because they're like completely incapable of living in the wild because they've been socialized with humans. If they were breeding them, this is probably impossible because they would be socialized. But if they were breeding them, making some money, and then like releasing them in the wild successfully, I would be like, okay. I still feel weird propping off animals like this, but I think first of all, if you breed them long enough, they will become domesticated and no longer wild, right? This has happened with lots of species, and I don't really know the timeline of that, but what happens, which is exactly what happened with like horses, dogs, and cats, and lots of other animals, is that when they're in close contact with humans, the ones that are often like successful in breeding or don't get put down early are the ones that are super nice and calm, and so you end up with animals that don't attack you generation after generation, and at that point you're creating like a new breed of pet and not a tiger,
Yeah, it makes me think of, did either of y'all see the documentary Sea of Shadows that came out,
No.
I think late 2019? So it's about the totuaba fish, the vaquita and the totuaba fish in Mexico. And it's a fish that people are obsessed with. So long story short, people are hunting this one fish because its bladder has some sort of like narcotic effect. And they like it in food in like Taiwan or something. But there's a fish that gets killed in the process. It's going extinct in Mexico. This one group conserves the fish. They try to release the fish back into the wild. When they try to release it into the wild, it doesn't know what to do, and it eventually kills itself. It's very dark. Spoiler alert in that one. But it gets at the question of, how much can we take something out of its natural environment and ever reintroduce it? And at a certain point, like Alec just brought up, does conservation kind of work against itself in that way? And I guess it's hard, to not think about that when watching something like this, because you wonder, can't Joe and Carol just take all their tigers and put them in the wild? But like, what does that mean practically? And they probably would all get killed within days.
I also think they missed some easy questions about like ethical questions around pets, right? Like we can look at Joe and be like, he's taking the tiger cubs from their parents, but pet breeders do this all the time. And, they talk about, tigers need lots of square miles to sort of successfully live. But I've always wondered, like, I've adopted an old cat. I love cats. But like, if I were getting a younger cat, would my small New York City apartment be like in a healthy environment for it? And like, we just don't ask those questions, but I feel like there's a lot of overlap. And just even watching the tigers and how they do the exact same weird shit that cats do, like, rub their face on cages and, kind of sit over their prey, exactly how my cat, I don't know. It made me wonder about certain things.
Definitely.
To go back to your earlier question about whether this would have been popular had we not been in self-isolation, I don't think it would have reached this level of popularity. Do either of you remember during the 9/11 attacks, there was that movie that came out by Mariah Carey, and it was a total like...
Geely?
No, but it was something like a Geely
Glitter.
Kind of story. Glitter, yeah.
Oh, I've heard about that.
And it like knocked it out of the park, like at the box office, I think. It did so well, and people said that it did well because in such a stressful time, people wanted an escape, and it didn't matter what it was. They wanted something to take their mind off of the current events that they were dealing with. So I wonder if that's something similar right now, that we need our minds to have a rest and to not think about the pandemic and death and family and loved ones. So it's easier to watch The Tiger King than it is to think about COVID-19.
Should we all watch Glitter? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
So we're gonna wait till the end, but we're announcing the Culture Binge Movie Watch Club. We're starting with Glitter. We'll give you details at the end. No, but I think you're right that like during times like this, sensationalism helps. And I know that in my household, at least my partner and I, who never watch reality TV, I'm not gonna say which one, have been binging a reality TV show. because it feels like that pure sensationalist escape. Now we need to move on because we have so much good stuff to talk about. But final question here: at what point in the series did you all realize that Joe Exotic's country music was all lip synced because he didn't make it?
Wait, I was like, his singing is weirdly competent. So
yeah, it's because it's non-existent.
I knew he was lip syncing in the music video because that's what everyone does, but he does not sing.
That is not Joe Exotic's voice. There is a duo in Washington State that writes all the music for him. You know, classic songs like "Here, Kitty, Kitty." But yeah, I'll say this: I'm proud of myself. Within 10 seconds of the first music video, I was like, "That's not him." I know it's not.
I'm not a fan of country music, but I was like, "Hey, this actually isn't that bad." I like the music.
Those
videos
songs are good.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know, but I think it would. If you told me that was a popular country song without saying who made it, I'd be like, okay, sure.
And that's why now my favorite part of the show, looking back, is one clip where they're kind of interviewing him in a casual setting. He's like, yeah, the music for me, that's just my escape. That's where I go to just really express myself. And it's like, mother, that's not you. Cool. Well, that's that. And once again, if you've watched Tiger King, we want to hear from you later so you can tell us what you thought about it. If you haven't watched it, I don't know, maybe don't. I'll say that. If you have not watched it at this point, maybe find something better to watch. But speaking of things that unequivocally help the world and are good and that there's nothing bad to say about, Serby, what's up with the Peace Corps?
Peace Corps, so many things to talk about. So the Peace Corps is a volunteer program run by the U.S. government. So for those of you who don't know, these volunteers work in developing countries for about 2 years, and they help local communities with anything from health and education to agriculture and environment and economic development. And I've always been interested in the Peace Corps. When I graduated from college, there was a very, very brief moment when I thought about joining, and then I realized that I would be horrible at that experience. So I came to my senses, but I've always been very interested. So I recently came across an article published in the New Yorker last month about the program's connection with China. This year, the Peace Corps abruptly ended the program in China, saying that the country had developed so much that it was graduating from the Peace Corps. Others say that the program ended because of political reasons. I say that we don't focus on China at all and rather discuss whether the Peace Corps is helpful or detrimental to local communities. So before we jump in, I have a few facts to share. So one is that there is very little quantitative evidence that the Peace Corps has a positive development impact on local communities. And two, it costs U.S. taxpayers about $50,000 per volunteer per year. And there are roughly 7,000 volunteers each year. So that's about $350 million a year that we spend on the Peace Corps. So opponents of the Peace Corps allege that the program is a form of American exceptionalism, which is the concept that the U.S. is superior to other nations and that Americans have a unique mission to transform the world. Furthermore, the idea of white saviorism or Western saviorism is also important in this discussion, since it refers to people visiting struggling nations in order to fix their problems without having a full appreciation of their culture and history. Proponents say that the Peace Corps volunteers help empower local communities. For example, individuals can work on specific projects. They can help farmers increase food security. They can teach computer skills to local businesses to help them connect with the global marketplace. They can work in HIV/AIDS education to educate local communities about sexual health. So before I tell you what I think, I'd love to know what the two of you think, or if either of you have known people who have been Peace Corps volunteers. What are your thoughts?
I haven't known anyone who's done it. Recently, I read Gia Tolentino, the New Yorker writer, put out a book called Trick Mirror, and she writes about her experience in the Peace Corps. And it sounds not good. And she in particular talks about how, as a woman in the Peace Corps, she had to deal with a lot of sexual harassment. And even if you go to the Wikipedia page for the Peace Corps, there's an entire section on sexual assault and harassment because there's such a rampant history of that, particularly with the women who join it. I, for a while, and I guess this isn't true, but for years, someone told me once it was a front for the CIA, and that's how it started. So I, of course, just believed that uncritically. Maybe that's true. I don't know.
I could add a quick caveat. I don't know about the CIA claim, but I know a lot of the United States humanitarian efforts across the world, especially during the Cold War, were mostly framed as like propaganda efforts. And so this isn't the Peace Corps. This is different. But like we went, the United States like tried to eradicate malaria around the world. Then we were involved in smallpox and also polio. And the reason they would write the checks, and like we, honest to God, were trying to do these things, but the reason they were writing the checks is because everyone was so mad at us during the Vietnam War globally. We're like, hey, maybe if we make you die less from malaria, you won't hate us as much. And so that's one specific example, but a lot of the things we do are framed strategically like that. Like we're going to give, aid to this country because we want to sort of make them more pro-American so that they don't like have a socialist revolution or so they don't become an ally of the USSR.
Yeah.
And so, the Peace Corps was founded, I think, under Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen or vetted claims that they were involved with the CIA, but I think the mission is still the same of, we're going to help people, but we're really helping people to shore up support for America and its like military operations abroad.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's hard to imagine something like the Peace Corps not having an explicit or implicit ideological function, kind of along with what you were saying there, Alec. And it also just makes me think for America to have a Peace Corps, it'd be like if like Charlie Sheen ran a sobriety corps or something like that. Like, I just don't know if globally, if you look at America and think like this is the country that's going to teach us about peace and prosperity and fighting inequality, because this is going to be a shock to many, but we have quite a few problems of our own on our shores. So I think there's often been that criticism as well of, what are we doing domestically? I know they have like a program, is it like City Year or something like that, which is a sort of domestic counterpart? Or no, AmeriCorps. I'm sorry, AmeriCorps.
Oh, and Teach for America, which is also a shit show.
Yeah. Oh, and you asked this before about if any of us had done it or been a part of it. I was actually a part of AmeriCorps for a year, so I guess I have been associated with it. And all I'll say is it was bad and not good in many ways, and felt like a way to, I guess, create government oversight and control for nonprofits by giving them employees and volunteers and interns that were on AmeriCorps contracts that then meant you had to do things a certain way. So in terms of what Alec was saying with the kind of like ideological and cultural and political influence of the Peace Corps overseas, I know the nonprofit I was working at under an AmeriCorps grant, it was kind of like that. Like it constrained what I was allowed to do and work on because it had to be in alignment with their values.
Interesting.
So is there anything, the image that comes to mind, again, not about the Peace Corps, but like U.S. Humanitarian efforts in, let's say, like Africa, is they think they understand the problem and they have like a solution that is just so far from like the reality of what's happening. Like building certain things that like, but not like teaching the people who live there how to use them so they immediately break and nothing happened. Like, is that in the article that you were reading?
So that's been in some of the research that I found, that they come in and they have these ideas of what African nations need. So they get there and they start to implement their projects only to find out that the community is not interested in those things. They'll either say, we don't need that. We already get food aid from this other community. What we need is this. Or they'll say that there's so much there's a lack of support and structure from the Peace Corps that it's up to the volunteer to figure out their their project. So I spoke to one former volunteer who was in South America, and she said that it took about a year for her to get support from the local community to actually do her project. And then by the time she got it going, she's like, I had to leave in like 9 months and the project just fell. So for like a year, she didn't do anything. I mean, she tried to do things, but she wasn't affecting change or doing what she wanted to do. So it seems like we have these ideas of what we think countries need and what local communities need. And we go there and we start to impose our solutions on them without really understanding what that community needs. And I mean, and I haven't joined the Peace Corps. So if there is a Peace Corps volunteer out there and I'm getting everything wrong, please write in to set me straight. But I do think there's a real problem with the Peace Corps because it has the potential to diminish a community sense of agency. And they could come to rely on these volunteers or maybe see these individuals as experts and rely less on their own ingenuity to create solutions and solve problems in order, in favor of the opinions of others. And I also don't like that there's lack of support and structure from the Peace Corps. Like, you're just sort of on your own once you get to a community. So who do you turn to if you need help or advice or anything like that? There's nothing to help support the volunteers once they're there. And I think that $350 million could be better spent elsewhere, or maybe in a more impactful way, in a more structured way. I don't think the Peace Corps is really what we need.
Well, yeah, and everything you're saying really makes me think as well of some of the problems with like certain sorts of religious missionary work and overseas ministry stuff. Because one of the biggest issues you get in those contexts are people doing projects that they think people need or want, projecting their cultural values, and a lack of, I guess, what we could call like cultural anthropological research or sort of ethnography on those places, what they need to do. And, you know, people that do like ethnographic research often have to spend tons of time in communities just to get to the point where they can begin to start understanding things and being accepted. So like you said, just to plop down there like that, maybe not the best. I mean, do you think, and this is asking a big question, is there, can either of you imagine like an alternative to this, a way that a nation could have a volunteer program like this that didn't suck?
Yeah, I think the difference is, this is going to use like a military analogy, but I think it's similar. Like, I think there's a difference between saying you're fighting a war and we're going to like drop our entire military there and like kind of take over, versus sending volunteers. So like during World War II, we would send pilots to, you know, the UK who would, you know, serve under the British Army, fly their planes, et cetera, et cetera. And so like they're just getting sort of more bodies to help them. Similarly, like on global intervention, one model is like, again, we're going to fix the problem. The other is like, we're going to work with like the existing sort of infrastructure. And I think on the volunteer level, it's the same thing, right? Like, what are the health organizations that are locally run? Should you go there? Like, is there a way? I even met at VidCon last year, and I don't really know much about what he's doing, so I don't think it was an evil, horrible front. But he was a dentist, but his YouTube channel was all about traveling the world, and he was able to travel to like almost every country on earth because he would just contact like local governments or like dentistry groups being like, hey, do you need a volunteer dentist for, you know, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year, whatever. But again, like not setting up his weird dentistry organization to run, he would just probably show up at whatever infrastructure they had and start cleaning people's teeth and removing cavities and stuff like that. And I think that's probably the best model. Granted, I think there are probably some cases where if the infrastructure doesn't exist, again, this happens in public health a lot, like we'll help you out, but I don't know, it gets super tricky.
Yeah. That guy's dentistry thing kind of sounds like a Doctors Without Borders thing, who for the most part seems like a solid group. Maybe.
I think maybe send us email if they're not.
Yeah, let us know. Ugh.
I do agree that connecting with local organizations like NGOs would be really great. I went to college with a girl who is a nurse, so she moved to Africa and worked at a OBGYN clinic, and she helped deliver babies. So, and one of the things that she did was she helped design these like these foam tools to help like prop up the women's bodies to help make delivery easier. So I think that is a small thing that can have a big impact, because a lot of these women were in labor for like 50 hours and she was able to cut that down. So I think that's like a small thing that has a big impact and can save lives. I also like the idea of Doctors Without Borders. I don't know if it's actually good or not, so if somebody has experience with that, please let us know. The other thing that comes to mind is Japan's English teaching program that's like supported and organized by the Japanese government, where it's like super hard to get into. I think it's like a very competitive process, and it's very structured from what I understand, that they like send you to rural villages to teach English. So I don't know if it's good or not, but I liked the idea of that. Maybe that could be useful.
I think the last thing that I want to bring up is there's this great video. This is not an international thing, but it's the same sort of logic of I'm going to help but make things way worse. Real Engineering is a YouTube channel, put out this great video on ventilators. Everyone's like, we're going to build these low-cost ventilators. And he goes through how they're made and how they will kill lots of people because they don't understand how ventilators actually work that hospitals need. What happens is if you put too much air and air pressure into the lungs, you will irreparably damage them and kill people. And essentially people are just designing all these like plastic bags full of air to like shove air down their throats. And that's not how like real ventilators measure the air pressure. They're finely tuned. They like have some mechanism to make sure that doesn't happen. It's a great video, Real Engineering. But again, it's that logic of I know the solution when you don't at all know the solution. I think it's amplified when you're dealing with like cultures you don't understand.
Yeah, don't build your own ventilator. And I do feel like, the point Serby's bringing up, which we can end on, is no one should try to help. It's not worth it. It's all in vain. Never do anything because you'll end up screwing it up.
And don't.
No, but do not, under any circumstances, tip. No, but if and especially too, if anyone has experience with it, I'm sure we'd love to hear about it. Any final thoughts, Serby, before we move on?
No, please write in if you have experience with Peace Corps. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you're there now and you're under some weird contract, you can use an anonymous name. We'll respect it. We will not snitch. That's a policy of this podcast. No snitching.
They all had to come home because of COVID-19. No Peace Corps volunteers anywhere.
Oh, okay. Well, speaking of COVID-19, Alec, we know that you are our in-house expert on all types of health-related conspiracies. It's sort of like your pet project. You're awake at night reading books about anti-vaxxers and stuff. Yeah. What do you have to share with us about the wide world of COVID-19 conspiracy theories?
I think I found my new favorite conspiracy, and
yes.
It's really competing with Flat Earth, so we'll see. But every time I think I've sort of wrapped up neatly my understanding of the conspiracy and what they're saying, it just has like a new twist and turn that it's just amazing. So the conspiracy theory is, and FYI, I'll get to this, but these theories are wrong, and I can explain that. But that 5G, the nice, fast internet service, is causing COVID-19, coronavirus, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure where the claim originated, but specifically, I watched this video that has since been taken down, but it was at like 600,000 views by this guy named Thomas Cowan, who makes the claim in this 10-minute video. But this basic idea has been spread by celebrities like Woody Harrelson, who wasn't like, I believe this, but he's like,
oh no.
He was like, I should check this out. Like, some friends have been sending this to me. Some singer I'd never heard of. People in England are burning cell phone towers, some of which don't even provide 5G service. They're just regular 4G. And it's suspected it's because of these conspiracy theories. People are also selling anti-5G thumb drives. Have no idea how that works. That was a thing I learned this morning. But I really want to know what they're claiming. But anyway, this video by this guy, Thomas Cowan, had 600,000 views. I'm not sure if he originated the theory. I think anti-5G stuff predated this. But the video, and I'm sorry that you all can't watch this, it was amazing by just the shit he was saying. In 10 minutes, he manages to make a series of claims, including viruses are not infectious microbes as we understand them. I'm going to call this virus denialism. It's not that viruses don't exist, but he thinks they are the toxic byproduct of cells cleansing themselves. So like your cells, like, here's a bit of DNA that I want to expel, and I'm going to put it out there. And as part of this theory, he thinks that all or most modern pandemics since the 1900s have been caused by like the electrification of the earth, including the Spanish flu, which I believe killed millions of people. He claims it is not infectious. He cites some bizarre anecdote that I couldn't find the actual source of, that the Boston Health Department took snot out of people's noses and injected it into people and could not cause flu in other people. So again, like the Spanish flu was caused by radio waves. By the way, there have been countless studies where people take like they take the viral material, snot, or just virus cells, the viral material, and inject it into monkeys, humans, whatever, and it causes the flu. That's how fucking viruses work. So again, that is not true. The best part is this guy is a medical doctor. Not only is he a medical doctor, he has a practice in San Francisco. He is on probation. So there was a decision from the California Medical Board that kind of revoked his license, but then stayed the revocation. So he's on probation for 5 years. And here's what he did. There was a cancer patient, a person with metastatic breast cancer, I read the whole complaint. This is how fucking deep I am into this. A person with metastatic breast cancer calls him, is like, what should I do? He's like, you should see an oncologist. So thank you, Thomas, for encouraging these people to see an oncologist. But also take this drug. This drug has never been FDA approved. There has never even been safety trials for it. And actually, I think like since then, there might be phase 1, which are animal trials for some unrelated condition. But the manufacturer had to stop making it because it was dangerous. And the manufacturer, after like 6 months or something like that, was like, hey, we can't sell this to you anymore. It's dangerous. At which point she calls Thomas Cowan and is like, what the fuck? What is this drug that I'm taking? And what got him was, not only did he tell a patient to take an unlicensed, untested drug that we don't know is safe or not, he did not perform a physical examination, which is pretty important. He didn't even look at her medical records. Like, you know, anytime you prescribe anyone anything, you need to be like, oh, am I prescribing you something that might kill you based on something else? Also did not record any of the information from any of the phone calls. So he's barred from treating cancer patients. And this was in 2017.
Barred from treating all patients.
Yeah, I think so too. And actually, I'm trying to figure out, I actually looked at, as I was watching his videos, if I could like, because you can send a complaint about a doctor, but it seemed like the criteria for sending them, him saying dumb shit on YouTube videos, was not in there. But if I'm wrong, please let me know. I have lots of things I'd like to send. I have the videos downloaded on a hard drive. But anyway, so I dove even deeper into this. This guy has an 1.5 hour long Zoom like conference call where he's explaining all this shit. It gets even better. Not only does he think, he points everyone to a website that says viruses might not exist. Like, I came across this idea called germ theory denialism, which is that Louis Pasteur is wrong, that like infectious diseases, or most of what we know as infectious diseases, don't exist. And there's this famous quote. There was this rival of Pasteur who was like, I believe, an actual scientist. It's just, he had one theory of like what was making everyone sick. Pasteur had the other, which was germs. Pasteur won because he was right. But he has this quote that's like, germs are nothing, terrain is everything, about like the environmental influences on health. And, you know, there are environmental influences on health, but this is like the cornerstone of germ theory denialism. And that quote was even mentioned by Bill Maher on live television in a thing about how vaccines are dangerous. There's a lot of overlap with anti-vaxxers here. And I would say the cherry on top is that the guy is also an HIV denier, which is the idea that the HIV virus does not cause AIDS. There's something else making people with AIDS sick. Again, not true, but yeah, that's where we're at.
He's a real winner, this one.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I mean, okay, so if I'm in a devil's advocate, why people would want to believe in COVID conspiracies, this is in no way a defense of the psychopaths you're talking about. I get why people like this stuff. Now, I don't, to be clear, but when something like this happens, we feel like we have no control. We feel like because we're not experts, we can't understand anything, and it's very scary. But we hear some conspiracy that gives us a secret clue or a hint or something we can understand. Now I feel like I have some control again.
Totally.
Like I might have some knowledge. So I want to start by saying I guess at least empathize, if not sympathize with, you know, the motivation for people getting into stuff like this. But it's batshit crazy, and it's very dangerous, and it's scary to me in a world where especially a lot of, and I don't want to hate on old people, because I guess to some people I'm an old person, but to like really old people, a lot of them look at the internet as a reliable source. Like people's grandparents and stuff think like, oh, so-and-so is a doctor, and so-and-so is on the internet, and he's broadcasting like a TV show. He's basically like a Dan Rather figure. And then they say this crazy shit, and I think people can really fall for it and really make reckless decisions. And of course, it's one thing when a conspiracy leads people to believing dumb shit on their own. It's another thing when people are burning down cell towers, especially during a time where being connected and using cell service might be a little gosh darn important. So it's scary stuff. And it's scary that people like this can have that big of a platform. And then I just always wonder with people like this, do they even believe what they're saying? Or is the conspiracy theorist themselves a sort of cult leader who's doing what they're doing for the sake of some sort of attention or control themselves? Or are they really like the person who's not Christ but thinks they're Christ and wants to lead all of us to the land of salvation?
I'm really torn. I'm curious what Serby thinks. I've started operating under the assumption that all these people are sincere.
Oh boy.
Including like flat earthers. I believe, I mean, sure, there's shitlords on the internet who are just trolling, but like Mark Sargent, I think that guy believes it. And like,
that's not the guy that killed himself,
he's living at his mom's
right?
place. Like, he's not making millions of dollars off this. But yeah, I think, do you think they believe it, Serby?
I don't know, man. People are fucking weird. Like, the more that like I read about what other people think about COVID and just having so much time at home to not do anything has made me just realize that people are so strange, and this is why I self-isolate by choice all day, not even just COVID times. I don't know. I think I agree with Michael that this is a form of control, that people will believe these things because they need an answer. I think that people who spread these conspiracy theories or believe in these theories have, well, there are two camps. I think one, there could be like maybe some mental health issues, like if you really feel this paranoid and that's your way of thinking. The other people, I think they lack critical thinking skills, which is due to poor education or just a lack of insight and things like that.
Well, there's two things. First, I don't even think the lack of education is, this person is a medical doctor who completed medical school. Although I have noticed a thing where a lot of conspiracy theorists have like advanced degrees, and especially like anti-vaxxers are generally very well educated and like upper class and stuff like that. But I think what it is I actually think medical school is the perfect example of this, because medical school isn't necessarily about critical thinking skills. It's about like rote memorization of like the various things that could be killing somebody. And so, and this person, like in watching this, is very well read, like understands the basic principles that he's disagreeing with. Like, it's not that he doesn't understand. He knows how viruses in actual science are said to work. He's just like, nah, that's wrong for his variety of reasons. So like, he's well read and also is that kind of smart where like he can memorize stuff, but like, I think maybe maybe it's lacking critical thinking skills. Maybe it's just like the way we teach science is like allowing these people to sort of like glom on to like bad and dumb ideas. Because I do think like the way science is taught is just like as a series of facts and not as like a way to sort of approach and understand the world, which I think is more important, right? Like to me, understanding that, force equals mass times acceleration. I hope I got that formula right. I think that's important, but I think it's also incredibly important to understand like how Newton formulated that and like how people came to understand that Newton was wrong, right? And like how those things happen. And so there's that. So I don't think it's that they're dumb or lack education. Yeah.
Maybe he falls in the first camp though, of mental illness.
I don't think that's, I think for some people, like, especially when it gets into, here's the thing, a lot of the things they complain about are rooted in some kernel of truth, right? Like a lot of the homeopathic and sort of doctors complain about the way pharmaceutical companies are greedy. They complain about the way that like doctors have a tendency to sort of like shuffle their patients in and out because that is sort of what's economically necessary. And those are all like criticisms that very reasonable people have made about these things, but then they just take it a step further. And I think that's a lot different. and this does happen with like sort of mental illness, but like the person looked at me wrong, they're a CIA agent. Like that's not what I'm hearing from these people.
Yeah,
So
it's
like
hard to
rational
like.
arguments, but that are just so wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know the hard thing too, and this kind of relates to something you were saying a second ago, Alec, is, I mean, in one sense, I wouldn't want the flip side where we live in a culture in which everyone assumes that science is sort of unequivocally, objectively right. We know that, there's scientific paradigm shifts in which all the research we had before can change or look different in the light of new research and critical thinking. So it's this weird balance where like we want to encourage people to think critically, to not take everything as immutable fact. At the same time, it's sort of like when keeping it critical goes wrong. When people are so skeptical, it becomes not a healthy skepticism, but a reckless skepticism that leads to, I guess, makes it easier for people to believe shit like this.
Yeah. And what I think is even interesting is the mechanism, like figuring out that the novel coronavirus causes the symptoms known as COVID-19 is actually like kind of interesting, and I'm not going to get into it all now, but like some scientist has to go in there and figure out a way to prove that by like sequencing DNA or RNA. They put that in another cell. Okay, it had like a bad effect on another cell. And just to give a quick example, this exact thing happened with the Spanish flu, where there was one guy going around being like, the Spanish flu is caused by a bacteria, and other people were like, no, it's caused by this other thing way smaller than that. And for a while, most people believed it was the bacteria, but then they started seeing like, oh, actually this bacteria is like only in like 30% of people suffering from the Spanish flu. It's in 60% of people with tuberculosis. And so they're like, okay, well, what is it? And then they sort of were able to isolate and identify the virus. And, that was in, all of these sick patients. And like similar things happen, right? Like it's not like someone just like raises their hand and be like, I've discovered the magic thing. Like there is a process for discovering if a virus is causing a specific disease. And in fact, when people were getting sick from HIV/AIDS at first, this was the big thing. Like, what the fuck is causing it? How do we discover it? But especially during that process, and even especially now with COVID, like a lot of what we know is like what's called like pre-publication, where people are putting out their findings, but they have yet to be peer reviewed. And all these things. And the conspiracy theorists point to these as like, see, it's all bullshit. But really, it is the scientific process to be like, oh, okay, you claim that this virus is causing COVID, but we're just going to check. We're going to peer review it. We're going to make sure like, everything works out. If I actually magically discover that's not caused by the virus you think it is, but actually this other virus that looks slightly different, like I'm probably going to like, everyone's going to respect me a lot, and I'm going to get like a great job and possibly like the Nobel Prize for it. It's not like some conspiracy. Like if somehow we're magically wrong about what causes these symptoms and it's actually some other virus or some other bacteria, which by the way, there's no reason to believe that currently because, we've done the testing, but that person would be like showered with praise.
Well, this is wildly interesting. We do need to head towards a conclusion if you do have last thoughts on this. But I mean, I think the most important thing, right, is just that everyone listening and watching knows like it's a scary time. Avoid conspiracies like this, and remember that the only known cure and prevention is to microwave lemon juice and cayenne pepper and drink it via your nose. Anything anyone else tells you is a lie. That's the only thing you can do for sure. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Great.
No.
Well, let's get into something that isn't a conspiracy, and that's that we love to hear from you. And by you, I don't mean Alec and Serby. I'm indifferent in hearing from you. But we mean the people that watch and listen to this. You're the best. You are this podcast. So hit us up. So if you want to call us, you can call us at 1-213-534-8807. That is 1-213-534-8807. Leave us a voicemail. We can hear your voice. And then if you're sarcastic, we'll get it from your tone. If you're indignant, we'll get that as well. You won't have to explain it in an email with fonts. But if you do want to leave us an email, it's culturebinge@wisecrack.co. No M. culturebinge@wisecrack.co. And also, maybe rate and review this podcast. Maybe if you're liking it right now and you're thinking this is a good thing that I want to see in the world and hear in the world, rate it. Give it 5 stars. Leave a comment. And in particular, let us know in the comments what career you think Alec would have been suited for if he lived in the 19th century. I'd love to hear about that. Let us know. But right now, do we have some voicemails and emails, Alec, that we need to get into?
I believe we do.
Hi there, guys. This is Logan calling again. Serby asked me to call back. In regards to the Culture Binge episode talking about isolation and also my roommate situation. When I sent that last voicemail, I did not know how bad it was going to get in terms of quarantining and social isolation. And you want to know how it's going? It is going great. We are all talking about like how thankful we all are for each other right now. And I'm also talking with my friends and family who are just alone right now, or maybe only have like one or two other people, and they're just going insane. They don't have enough people to talk to. So I'm feeling very fortunate for the circumstances that I'm in, and just being able to, I'm still an essential worker. I'm a delivery driver, so I have to go to work, and then I can come back and I can unwind talking about the catastrophic state of the world with all of my roommates. I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I just wanted to give you guys that update. Thank you so much for listening to me and playing my voicemail. You guys all take care, and please stay safe.
For a reminder, and Serby, maybe refresh my memory, this is Logan, who lives kind of communally with some roommates.
Yeah, he has, I forgot how many, but he has several roommates. And he called in after we talked about buying a house with friends. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how much he enjoyed it and how much he loved, coming home and having such a big support system.
Wow. Now that I'm into reality TV, all I want to know is if there's any romantic tension in that house. It's all I care about. Logan, let us know. We won't even say it. Just let us know. We won't talk about it on air. I want to know where the tension is, where there's jealousy, who's hooking up with who. I need it in my life. But that's a good update. I'm glad to hear back from him. I love hearing back from people.
Thanks, Logan. That was great. I'm so happy that things are working well. And I hope you stay healthy out there.
And that does sound fun.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it sounds fun to live with all your friends at a time like this.
Yeah, I don't know people who live with groups of friends, but I know couples that live together. And it seems like most of the couples I know are just arguing all the time. But my theory is that maybe arguing with someone all the time is bad. Not good, but maybe it's still better than being alone, because there's a difference between being angry and depressed, and I'd rather be angry than depressed.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Living with someone right now and it's just the two of you is weird. It's intense. I think a lot of us are going through that, but yeah, probably better that than nothing. Wow. Do we have any other calls or emails?
Okay, so the email, all right. Anyone who wants to send us the email, culturebinge@wisecrack.co. Also, as a reminder, leave us nice reviews on iTunes because we read them and they make us feel good and they help other people discover the show. But anyway, here's an email from Zach. This email's from March 30th, which I think is an important context. I don't know what the current state is of things where Zach is, but Zach says, "Dear Culture Binge crew, all the talk about social distancing and self-quarantine is very interesting to me because it's something I haven't experienced personally. You see, I live in a somewhat small North Alabama town, and as you might expect, some people are not taking this global pandemic seriously. The company I work for, which manufactures rugs, has done almost nothing to deal with COVID-19 beyond a couple of printouts on the break room tables telling people not to come into work if they have the coronavirus." Obviously foolproof. But anyway, recently the Alabama governor issued a state shutdown for all non-essential businesses, and wouldn't you know it, factories were not on the list of non-essential businesses. So my options are quit and self-isolate to protect myself, but have zero income, or keep working and hope for the best and continue to pay my bills. If my job were something actually essential, that would be one thing, but nobody needs new rugs right now unless the toilet paper runs out. Stay safe and healthy, Zach. I'm so sorry, Zach. I want an update. What's it like in Alabama now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm obviously in the middle of a giant shit show in New York, but it feels like things are almost maybe similar in the rest of the country.
Yeah, I wonder if for Zach's case, if it's possible, and I don't know the politics and policy behind this, if you can you quit a job and still apply for this new type of unemployment insurance? I know they've really expanded who can. So I would say maybe Zach, truly, if you're feeling like you're in a dangerous position, I mean, maybe that's an option. I shouldn't be giving anyone advice on anything, but I don't know. That's the thing to look into. This is serious shit, and hopefully everyone stays safe. And no one buy a rug right now. If you were thinking you were going to order a fucking rug today, maybe don't, and then help out Zach and his friends.
I'm sorry, Zach.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
It's okay. It was going to be good. Do you want to try again?
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like a similar thing for an essential service is everyone's like, oh my God, grocery store workers are heroes. And I think we should give them credit where credit is due. But I think the framing is weird because they're more like hostages. Because I don't think, maybe there are some grocery store workers and applause to these people who are like, I'm going to do my civic duty and make sure people get fed for minimum wage. And I respect those people, but I feel like a lot more of them are probably like, I can't afford to stop working and I really don't want to like die or possibly just get sick and end up in the hospital with a bill I can't afford, or like infect the person I live with who maybe is at risk. So I'm sorry, Zach, and I want to hear updates. But the next, moving on to the next emails from Jason. Jason says, hey, Wisecrack, I wanted to write in about the most recent episode of Culture Binge and share my tips for how to stay sane during COVID-19 quarantine.
Nice.
Like many Wisecrack listeners, I'm a big movie fan, but have quite a few gaps in my cinematic knowledge, spanning both the classics and more recent films that have won awards or just been well reviewed. I figured there will likely be no better time to dive into the hours upon hours of films I've been putting off watching, and so far I've been able to stay positive and optimistic through quarantine because of it. My advice to anyone like me who wants to become better versed in some classic films, the Turner Classic Movies channel, for anyone who still has a cable subscription, has proven to be a goldmine of movie catalogs. So far, the highlights have been Dr. Zhivago, Gaslight, and Network. Network is a favorite.
Oh, wow.
Mine and Jared's, possibly the two of you, not sure. And I'm looking forward to starting an Akira Kurosawa binge. I hope everyone is able to stay healthy, sane, and happy through the respective quarantines. Binge on, Jason.
That's awesome. And I think he's setting a good example. It's so easy to watch dumb stuff right now, but balance it out with some classics. Rewatch some stuff that you think sounds good. Look up some movie lists on some great websites and stuff like that. See what people at Wisecrack like, etc. Any more emails, or is that it for today?
We have one more.
Oh, great.
This is from Juan. Again, March 27th. I don't know. Juan is emailing us from Malaga, Spain. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I should know better. But anyway, March 27th. Don't know how things have changed in Spain since then. Hey guys, Juan here. That COVID thing has been pretty rough here. We've been in quarantine for over 2 weeks now, probably 4 by the time the next episode of the podcast comes out. And we are not allowed to leave the house unless we can prove that we are going to work or to buy groceries because there are policemen everywhere. Goddamn. Anyway, I wanted to share the few things I've discovered that keep me sane during this awful time. Number one is Just Dance YouTube videos. Dancing as if it were playing is a great way to do a little bit of exercise with my family and laugh together. I think Serby talked about that. 2, having what I call a culture journal. It's just a notebook where I write every book I read and every series movie I watch. I also try to summarize the message that I feel it conveys. It helps making me feel like I'm not consuming content mindlessly just to pass the time. I fucking love this.
Ooh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. I think we could all learn from Juan. Does he have more?
Yeah. Sorry, one more. The third is realizing that I cannot be as productive as when I could leave for a walk or study with friends. My mental health has improved since I stopped trying to study 6 hours every day, attending online class and attending online classes. That's all. Just wanted to thank you guys. All 3 of you are beautiful. Thank you, Juan. Hope you have a nice quarantine.
Well, I think Juan's third point, especially the first 2 are rad. We should all do those things. That sounds great. But his third point about realizing that he can't be as productive, I would just say that's the most clutch thing for everyone to realize right now. This like weird thing that happened the first couple weeks here was like, I'm gonna write my screenplay. I'm gonna do my thing right now. Like, no, we're facing a global pandemic. We all have a lot of stuff we're dealing with in terms of how we're feeling, and I think it's totally okay to be kind to yourself and not have that much expectation. So everyone be like Juan. I think we could. Can we say that? Is that are we comfortable with that?
Until we find out that Juan is like a murderer
or breeds tigers.
Juan could be a tiger breeding murderer, and I would still want to be like him. So be like Juan, and also be like the people that rate and review this podcast. Be like the people that call us at 12135348807. Be like the people that email us at culturebinge@wisecrack.co. We know this is going to continue to be a weird time, and we want to hear how you're doing. We want to hear what you're doing. We want to hear what sort of culture you're consuming. We want to hear if there's anything you would like to hear us talk about. So please bug us. Let us know. We're here to serve you. We are the heroes of... We're not the heroes, but...
we read and listen to everything. So if you write an email, we do read it. It comes directly to my personal inbox.
Yes. And also, I'm breeding tigers. So before we get going, Alec is the Tiger King. Mine are all in tiny cages under a couch. They're not allowed to see sunlight. But if people... we're only around every couple weeks, or for our British listeners, fortnightly. So in the intervening time, Serby and Alec, where can people find you?
Suri Patel 22 on Twitter.
Wisecrack Alec also on Twitter.
At Michael O. Burns.
We put
also
it on the screen.
Twitter.
Look at that.
We did. We put it on the screen. And like I always say, just DM me on Twitter and I'll give you my address if you just want to come over and hang out. But don't do that. I don't know. I'd probably do it though because I get reckless on the internet. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening and watching. Alec and Serby, thank you to you for being delightful as always. And thank you to me. Listen, we got to learn to love yourself sometime. This has been Culture Binge. We'll be back soon. Come back in 2 weeks and see us then. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.